The galaxy was a wide and endless place, full of stars, planets, and alien civilizations. Yet, for all its wonders, it was also full of fear, politics, and danger for years. Humanity had worked hard to earn a seat at the great galactic table, the Galactic Council, where leaders from every known species came together to discuss peace, trade, and security. It had not been easy. Humans were seen as newcomers, too young compared to the ancient alien races that had been flying through space for thousands of years. But over time, they had proven their value through trade, exploration, and even helping settle disputes between other worlds. And now, the Terran Union, the government representing all human colonies, believed it was time to strengthen ties with one of the most powerful and feared empires in the galaxy, the Zorath Dominion. The Zorath were not known for kindness. They were a warrior race, tall, scaled, and covered in thick armor-like skin. Their ships were massive and bristling with weapons. They had fought many wars over the centuries, winning most of them, but lately, they had shown interest in peace, or at least, that was what their leaders claimed, to test this new friendship. The Terran Union sent their most skilled diplomat, Ethan Cole, to negotiate with the Zorath High Command. Ethan was respected across human space, not just because of his experience, but because of his calm, patient way of dealing with even the most hostile alien leaders. He had faced angry merchants, arrogant generals, and even pirates, and had always managed to walk away with an agreement in hand. Many believed if anyone could turn the Zorath into a friend, it was him. The meeting was set to take place on Arcadia Prime, a shining neutral station floating between the territories of several major powers. It was a beautiful place, giant glass domes filled with gardens, clean white corridors lined with banners from dozens of worlds, and a constant flow of ships docking and departing. The whole galaxy could watch the talks through live holostreams. Billions of people, human and alien, tuned in to see what would happen. For a while, things seemed calm. Ethan was seen shaking hands with the Zorath representatives, smiling politely and taking his seat at the long, oval-shaped negotiation table. Beside him were aides from the Terran Union, quietly taking notes. And monitoring the discussion, across from him, sat the Zorath generals. Their black eyes unreadable, their deep voices echoing across the hall. The conversation started with trade offers and border agreements. Ethan spoke about building trust, opening new travel routes, and reducing military patrols along the shared borders. For a moment, it looked like history might be made. But then, something changed. One of the Zorath generals leaned forward, speaking in a low voice to his second-in-command, another general. Smirked, an expression rare for their kind, and gave a silent signal. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. The Zorath guards, who had been standing silently at the edges of the room, moved closer. Ethan noticed, but he remained calm, thinking perhaps it was just a change in security protocol. Then, without warning, one of the Zorath guards stepped forward and shoved the Terran aide aside. Another grabbed Ethan by the shoulders and yanked him up from his seat. The human delegation shouted in protest. Security alarms began to ring before anyone could stop them. The Zorath dragged Ethan toward the center of the hall. From somewhere, they brought a small device shaped like a black metal cube with glowing red symbols. Those watching from home did not understand at first, but some recognized it. Immediately was an execution torch, an ancient Zorath weapon used to burn enemies alive in public. Gasps echoed across the council chamber, and billions watching through the holostream went silent. Ethan's voice was calm at first, telling them this was a mistake, that peace was still possible, but the Zorath did not answer. Instead, one of the generals stood and declared loudly, "This is the fate of any who would try to weaken the Dominion." The words were translated instantly into dozens of galactic languages. In that moment, it became clear the Zorath never intended for peace. This was not a negotiation. This was a message. The guards activated the device, and fire roared to life, bright and hungry. They forced Ethan into the blaze, his body illuminated in terrible orange light, his voice turning into a scream that would be remembered forever. Some aliens in the chamber turned away, unable to watch. Others stared coldly. The human aides tried to rush forward, but they were restrained by armed soldiers on every human world. People stared at their screens in shock, children crying, adults gripping the edges of their chairs. Ethan's screams went on for several seconds before the fire swallowed him completely. When it was over, all that remained were ashes and the stench of burning flesh. The Zorith stood silently. Their message, clear humanity, was nothing to them. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then the Terran Union's ambassador to the Galactic Council, his voice shaking with fury, called for immediate withdrawal from the talks. The human delegation left Arcadia Prime under heavy escort, their faces pale. Word spread like a shockwave. News networks replayed the execution again and again, every time the footage played. The anger grew stronger, on Earth, in the colonies. And aboard every Terran ship, people began to speak the same words: Ethan Cole must be avenged. In the halls of the Galactic Council, alien leaders debated what to do. Some called for sanctions. Others claimed humanity should not act rashly. But those words did nothing to calm the fire, now burning in human hearts. The murder had not just taken a man's life, he had insulted all of humanity. And soon, the galaxy would learn that when you hurt one human, you face them all, somewhere deep in space. In the Terran Military Command Center, orders were already being typed into secure consoles. Shipyards would awaken, fleets would be called home, and Black Ops units would prepare to strike. The spark had been lit, and the storm was coming. And for the first time in a very long while, the galaxy began to feel afraid. They had seen wars before, but never the fury of an entire human race united for vengeance. What started on Arcadia Prime would spread to every corner of the stars. The name Ethan Cole would become a rallying cry, and the Zorith Dominion would learn the meaning of human wrath. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive dome of shining crystal and steel, where voices from 100 different species rose and fell in sharp debate. Under the glowing banners of peace and unity, delegates from every corner of the galaxy sat at their long, curved desks, their eyes fixed on the human section. The killing of Ethan Cole was still fresh in everyone's mind, replayed endlessly across the holostreams. But here, inside this hall, the Zorith Dominion's representatives sat without shame, their scaled heads held high, their sharp eyes glimmering with the confidence of predators. A tall, thin alien from walled. The Listen Republic raised its voice, urging calm, its translator device turning the words into the smooth tone of a politician. It spoke of restraint, of waiting for investigations, of not letting one incident destroy centuries of progress. Others nodded, some even daring to suggest that perhaps Ethan had provoked the Zorith. The human delegation sat in silence, their faces hard as stone, their hands clasped tightly. Captain Laura Mason, a decorated fleet officer temporarily assigned to observe the council proceedings, watched from the gallery above. She had seen wars start over far less than this. And as she looked down at the alien leaders, she knew many of them did not understand what was about to happen. The council speaker, an ancient being with skin like glass, called for humanity to consider diplomacy, to hold back from emotional decisions. The word emotional stung like an insult. It was the same term alien empires had used for centuries to describe humanity as rash and unpredictable. But Laura knew it was not emotion driving the humans now, was resolve, cold and steady, forged by the sight of their diplomat, burned alive before the galaxy. As the council session dragged on, alien delegates exchanged smug looks, whispering to one another that humanity would never risk an open war against the Zorith, too. Them humans were still the young species, quick to talk big. Slow to act, untested in large-scale galactic conflict, they believed humanity would rage for a few weeks, then return to trade deals and treaties. As always, when the meeting ended, Laura walked through the council's polished corridors, hearing bits of conversation in different languages. She caught the words reckless, amateurs, and even pitiful from alien aides who thought she couldn't understand. Her jaw tightened, but she kept walking, knowing that soon those same voices would speak very differently outside the council. In the shadow of the docking rings, humanity's ships stood waiting. The Terran delegation boarded their sleek diplomatic cruiser without a word, their eyes avoiding the press drones swarming for quotes. No statement would be given today. The silence itself was the statement. Back on Earth, in the war rooms beneath the Terran Defense Command headquarters, things were very different. Giant screens displayed maps of Zorith's space, glowing with points of interest shipyards, fuel depots, command stations, generals and admirals, their faces grim. Moved pieces across a holographic table, simulating battles that had not yet begun. Civilian leaders watched from the sides, giving quiet approval. The president of the Terran Union had already made her decision. The Zorith had to be answered, not with words, but with force. Across the colony's factories that had long been silent roared back to life. Orbital shipyards activated their long-dormant construction bays. Rows of massive steel skeletons began to take shape: warships, carriers, and something new. Something built in secret. The Vengeance-class battlecruiser, faster than anything in Zoroth space, armored like a fortress, and armed with weapons designed to punch through the heaviest shields. Each one would carry the names of those who had fallen in the Zoroth's wars. With Ethan Cole's name carved into the lead ship's bridge, on the Liberty, Captain Mason stood on the bridge, her crew silent but focused. She had received sealed orders, unreadable without her personal authorization codes. When she finally unlocked them, she stared at the words for a long moment, then nodded to her first officer. The Liberty would be leading the first wave of retaliatory strikes. No public announcement, no declaration. The galaxy would simply wake one day to find the Zoroth bleeding from wounds they never saw coming. In the darkness between stars, Black Ops ships already moved into position. Cloaked and silent, they drifted near enemy stations, their crews tense and ready, in hidden channels. Terran soldiers whispered Ethan's name as if it were a battle prayer. And in the council chamber light years away, alien leaders still debated policies, blissfully unaware that the war they thought they could avoid had already begun. The arrogance of the council was clear. They believed humanity would obey their calls for patience. But Captain Mason knew better. Humanity's answer was coming, and when it arrived, the galaxy would understand just how dangerous it was to mistake silence for weakness. Back on Earth, the skies above the great cities were no longer filled only with passenger shuttles and cargo freighters. Now, massive shadows moved across the clouds, warships rising from orbital docks, engines glowing bright as they climbed toward the stars. From the deserts of Mars to the icy shipyards of Europa, the entire Terran Union had shifted into a single, unstoppable rhythm. Every clang of metal, every spark from a welder's torch, every rumble of a departing vessel was another heartbeat in the growing war machine. Old fleets that had been resting in orbital graveyards were called back to life. Once proud ships, their hulls faded from years of neglect, were stripped down, rebuilt, and armed with the latest weapons humanity could produce. The engineers worked without pause, some sleeping in the hangars, refusing to go home while their ships were still unfinished. Factories that once made farming machines now churned out missiles and railgun slugs. Civilian freighters were converted into supply ships, painted in the silver and blue of the Terran Defense Navy. In the heart of this effort, the first of the Vengeance-class battlecruisers was completed. She was a thing of beauty and terror, long sleek lines hiding layers of heavy armor. Her rail cannons could tear through a dreadnought's core. Her missile batteries could turn fleets into drifting wreckage. And deep inside her reinforced hull, a new engine system pulsed with quiet power, capable of jump maneuvers so fast the Zorath would have no time to react. She was christened the TD's Ethan Cole. And the moment her name was revealed, the workers in the dockyard stopped, saluted, and stood in silence across the colonies. Propaganda hollis began to appear, medges of Ethan smiling, alongside the words, "He was the spark. We are the fire." Recruitment lines stretched for blocks as young men and women signed up to join the fight. Even those too old or injured to serve in the fleets found work in the war effort, building weapons, coding targeting systems, or mapping Zorath's supply routes. The galaxy had always called humanity resourceful, but now the word didn't feel strong enough. This was something else, something sharper, out in deep space. Secret meetings were held between Terran admirals and captains. Holographic maps glowed above the tables, showing Zorath's territory marked in red. High-value targets were listed: shipyards in the Kelvera sector, communication relays near the Rift Corridor, fuel depots orbiting uninhabited moons. The plan was not to meet the Zorath in open battle just yet. Instead, the Terran fleets would move like blades in the dark, striking suddenly and vanishing before the enemy could strike back. Make them bleed, make them afraid, make them doubt their own strength. On the Liberty, Captain Laura Mason stood at the forward viewport, watching as her ship left the Sol system. Her crew moved with quiet efficiency, faces lit by the glow of their consoles. They had been preparing for this moment since the day Ethan Cole died. Now, the sealed orders from High Command were open, and their course was locked. They were heading toward the Kelvera sector, where the first blow of the war would fall. Beyond the viewports, the stars stretched out endlessly. Somewhere among them, Zorath fleets were patrolling, confident in their power. They did not know that the hunters were coming. They did not know that every Terran ship now carried the same unspoken mission: make them pay. And as the Liberty's engines flared, disappearing into the blue swirl of a slipspace jump, Captain Mason knew the galaxy was about to change forever. Because the storm was no longer building, it had already begun. The war did not begin with speeches, parades, or formal declarations. It began in silence. In the black between stars, where Terran strike groups drifted like shadows, their hulls cold and dark, the Kelvera sector home to one of the Zorth Dominion's largest shipyards slept under the false comfort of routine patrols. Cargo drones hummed between massive construction platforms, welding the skeletons of future warships. Engineers in exosuits floated along hulls, never imagining that death was already slipping toward them, unseen. The Liberty emerged from slipspace in a flash of blue light, accompanied by 3 smaller destroyers and a stealth frigate. They came in from the edge of the system, where the gravity wells of distant asteroids masked their arrival. Inside her bridge, Captain Laura Mason's voice was steady as she gave the order: no hesitation. Number warning, no mercy, all ships, fire at will. In an instant, the void lit up, railgun. Slugs the size of shuttles screamed toward the shipyard's command hub, smashing through its shields in a storm of sparks. Missile swarms streaked forward, weaving through debris and automated turrets before detonating against hangar bays. One after another, Zorth warships, still under construction, erupted in brilliant blossoms of fire, their half-complete frames spinning away into the darkness. Engineers scrambled for escape pods. Alarms blared across the platforms. But the attack was too fast, too precise. Zorath patrol ships rushed to respond. Sleek, black-hulled interceptors powered toward the Terran fleet, weapons charging. The Liberty swung her broadside into position, unleashing a volley that shredded the first wave before they could close the distance. The destroyers moved like wolves around the edges, targeting shield generators and communication arrays. The stealth frigate, almost invisible in the chaos, slipped behind the largest fuel depot and planted a cluster of charges before jumping to safety. A heartbeat later, the depot went up in a white-hot sphere of plasma, consuming everything within. A kilometer, the battle lasted less than 15 minutes when the Liberty pulled away. The Kelverus shipyard was nothing but drifting wreckage and glowing embers. The Zorath Navy had been caught unprepared. Its defenders scattered or destroyed before they could mount a proper defense, as the Terran ships vanished into slipspace. Once more, the survivors floated in silence, their combs filled with static. Far away, in the Zorath capital, the news would arrive like a blade through the heart of their pride. Their untouchable shipyard, gone in a single night, destroyed by the species they had mocked as weak. Across the galaxy, the attack sent shockwaves. Alien news channels played grainy footage from fleeing cargo drones, showing Terran warships moving with lethal precision. Some worlds watched in awe, others in fear. In the Galactic Council, whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to arguments. Perhaps humanity was not so fragile after all. And in the dark war rooms of the Terran Defense Command, new targets were already being marked. The first blow had been struck, and it had landed deep. 4. The Zorath Dominion. It was the beginning of a nightmare. For humanity, it was only the opening move. The Zorath Dominion did not wait long to strike back. Across their vast empire, fleets were recalled from distant patrols. Shipyards worked without pause, and war drums echoed in their capital halls. The name Arcturus Station came up again. And again in their strategy, meetings an immense Terran fortress built into the orbit of a bright blue star. It was the keystone of humanity's supply lines, the beating heart that kept dozens of forward fleets fueled and armed if Arcturus fell. Terran warships would be stranded deep in hostile space, cut off from reinforcements. The Zoroth knew it, and so did the humans. The attack came like a tidal wave. Over 200 Zoroth warships surged into the system, their black holes reflecting the light of the star. Dreadnoughts led the charge, flanked by heavy cruisers and swarms of fighter craft. The void filled with the glare of weapons fired before a single word was spoken. From the station's command tower, alarms screamed as every gun turret rotated toward the incoming threat. Waiting for them in perfect formation were the Terran 3rd and 5th fleets. Dozens of destroyers, cruisers, and carriers spread like a steel wall between the enemy and the station. At the center of it all was the Liberty, her hull now scarred from the Kelverus raid, but her guns fully charged. Captain Laura Mason stood at the bridge window, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes locked on the largest Zorth ship, a monstrous dreadnought known as the Bloodfang. "Hold until they're in range," she ordered, her voice calm despite the storm about to break. When the Zorth fleet closed in, the void exploded into chaos. Railguns fired in synchronized thunder, hurling slugs that tore through enemy shields. Missiles streaked in deadly arcs, weaving between fighters and detonating against cruiser hulls. The Zoroth answered with their own fury, plasma beams slicing through the black. Shredding a Terran frigate in a single hit, the Liberty surged forward, her broadside unleashing a storm of fire into the Bloodfang shields. The dreadnought roared back with a blast that shook the Liberty to her core, alarms flaring red. Across the bridge, for hours, the battle raged. The Zoroth tried to flank, only to be met by Terran destroyers armed with point defense systems that shredded their fighter wings. Terran carriers launched wave after wave of bombers, slipping between capital ships to drop high-yield torpedoes into engine cores. In the deep heart of the fight, the Liberty traded blows with the Bloodfang, neither ship giving an inch. Then, a sudden breakthrough. Sensor officers reported a weakness in the dreadnought's rear shield array. Laura didn't hesitate. All batteries target that sector. The Liberty and 2 destroyers focused every gun they had. Explosions rippled across the Bloodfang's stern, the massive ship shuddering under the assault. Finally, with a blinding flash, her core ruptured, the Zorath dreadnought split apart. Spilling burning fragments into the void across the battlefield, Zorath morale broke. Ships turning to flee, the Terran fleets pressed forward, driving the enemy from the system. When the last Zorath vessel jumped away, Arcturus Station still stood, battered but unbroken. The cheers from its defenders echoed across every channel. For the Zorath Dominion, the loss was humiliating for humanity. It was proof this war would not be fought on the enemy's terms, and as the Liberty's crew caught their breath, Laura Mason knew that this victory was only the beginning. The Terran counterattack had truly begun, and the road ahead led straight into the Zorath's heart. With Arcturus Station safe and the Zorath fleet driven into retreat, humanity's momentum began to build like a rising tide across the colonies. The news spread faster than light. The great Zorath dreadnought Bloodfang had fallen, and the humans had held their ground against impossible odds. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a statement to the galaxy. Humanity could stand toe-to-toe with one of the oldest and most feared empires and win. In the days that followed, something began to shift. Allied species that had once looked at humanity with doubt or mild curiosity now reached out with offers of assistance. Small merchant worlds volunteered supply convoys. Mercenary fleets pledged their guns for a share of the fight. Even a few minor empires ones that had long been bullied by the Zorath sent warships to join the Terran cause. The war that had started as a single act of vengeance was becoming something larger, something the galaxy could not ignore but for humanity. This was still personal in every city. Ethan Cole's name was painted across walls and banners, his face projected on massive holoscreens. Children learned his story in schools. Soldiers carried small patches bearing his initials. The phrase for Ethan became the rallying cry whispered before each mission launch. The fire that had been lit at Arcadia Prime was now burning in every Terran heart. In the heart of Terran space, shipyards pushed their limits. New Vengeance-class battlecruisers rolled off the docks at a pace that stunned even their own admirals. The TDS Ethan Cole was no longer alone. Her sisters, the Resolute and the Iron Vow, had joined the fleets. Each one carried weapons and armor designed to counter Zorath tactics. Each one crewed by veterans who had already tasted battle and survived. For Captain Laura Mason, the war changed in those weeks. She was promoted to Admiral and given command of a new strike Group 20 warships. Hand-picked for speed and precision, their orders were not to hold ground, but to carve deep into Zorath's territory, tearing apart their supply chains, dismantling their shipyards, and spreading fear wherever they appeared. In a war room lit by holographic star maps, Laura stood before her captains and spoke in a voice that carried the weight of every life lost. "We are not here to fight their war," she told them. "We are here to end it, on our terms." The first targets fell quickly. A munitions depot on the moon of Fexra Prime erupted in a chain reaction that could be seen from orbit. A Zorath fuel convoy vanished without a trace, later found drifting in silence. Every ship disabled by precision EMP strikes, entire sectors went dark, their communication relays destroyed. Forcing the Zorath to fight blind, each mission left the Dominion weaker, more desperate. In the council chambers of the Zorath capital, frustration boiled over. Generals demanded more ships, more resources, but their war machine was bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Every time they tried to mass their fleets, human strike groups appeared somewhere else, forcing them to split their strength. It was a slow suffocation, and the galaxy was watching. From her flag bridge aboard the Liberty, now refitted with heavier armor and upgraded engines, Admiral Mason watched the stars streak past as they prepared for their next jump. Somewhere beyond the next horizon lay another target, another strike. that would tighten the noose around the Zoroth Dominion. This was no longer just revenge, this was the rewriting of the balance of power in the galaxy. And humanity was holding the pen. The final stage of the war loomed like a storm on the horizon. Every map in Terran High Command had the same red circle drawn on it, the Zoroth homeworld. It was a fortress world, wrapped in layers of orbital defenses, ringed with minefields, and guarded by the largest fleet the Dominion had left. No enemy had ever reached its skies, and no one had even dared to try. But Admiral Laura Mason knew that if humanity wanted the war to end on their terms, this was where they had to strike. The largest armada in human history assembled above the captured world of Dravix. Hundreds of ships filled the void battlecruisers, destroyers, carriers, stealth frigates. Even ships from alien allies who had sworn vengeance for their own fallen. The Liberty, once a lone predator on deep raids, now served as the flagship of the fleet. Her hull gleaming with fresh armor plates and her new experimental rail cannons locked in place. In the ready rooms, Marines checked their weapons in silence. Pilots ran their hands along the smooth hulls of their starfighters. There was no need for speeches. Every person here knew why they were going. The jump to the Zoroth system tore open the black of space. The moment the Terran Armada emerged, the battle began. Zoroth defenses lit up, lines of plasma fire and missile trails cutting through the void. Terran ships surged forward, railguns pounding. Bombers weaving through gaps in the enemy formation to strike at shield generators and command ships. The Liberty led the vanguard, her new rail cannons roaring with such force that enemy cruisers shattered in single shots. The fighting was brutal. Every kilometer was paid for in blood and steel. Zoroth dreadnoughts hurled everything they had. But the Terran fleet pressed on. Destroyers sacrificed themselves to open holes in the defensive line. Carriers launched wave after wave of fighters to keep the skies clear for the bombers. The void burned with the wreckage of ships from both sides. Drifting and broken, finally, the Liberty broke through. Her guns focused on the largest of the orbital defense platforms, blasting it apart piece by piece until it exploded in a sphere of white fire. Through the gap, Terran landing craft poured toward the surface. Marines stormed the Zoroth capital, fighting street by street under the shadow of the Dominion's towering spires. In the throne hall itself, the Zoroth War Council gathered in desperation. But they never had the chance to rally. Terran Marines burst through the gates. There, banners carried high. The fighting inside the city lasted hours. By the time the last resistance crumbled, the once proud capital lay silent, its skies filled with Terran ships. From the surface, Admiral Mason looked up at the shattered remains of the orbital defenses. She knew this was the point of no return. The war was over for the Zoroth. But there was still one final act left to make it official. The war ended not with cheers, but with a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls of the Liberty's bridge. In the great hall of the flagship, under the gaze of countless cameras, the surviving leaders of the Zoroth Dominion knelt before the Terran flag. Their scaled heads bowed low. Their armor was dented and scorched. Their once proud eyes dulled. The fire of defiance long since burned away. Admiral Laura Mason stood before them, flanked by her senior officers. The galaxy watching as the terms of unconditional surrender were signed into record, when the last seal was pressed into the document. It was over. No more fleets would rise for the Zoroth. No more soldiers would march under their banners. The Dominion that had once ruled vast sectors with an iron grip was broken. Its territories now under watch by Allied patrols, and yet, the victory felt heavy. So many ships gone. So many names that would never be spoken in roll call again. Ethan Cole's ashes were carried home aboard the TDS Ethan Cole herself. The journey to Earth was slow, deliberate, as if the entire fleet wanted the galaxy to see the man they were bringing home when they reached Sol. Every Terran ship, from the smallest scout to the mightiest battlecruiser, lined the approach to the capital. Their running lights formed a river of stars, guiding the flagship to the heart of Earth. The burial took place in the Gardens of Remembrance, under a clear sky filled with the steady glow of orbiting ships. A monument rose above the simple spire of black stone, its surface engraved with the words, "He was the spark, we were the fire." Citizens from every colony stood shoulder to shoulder, silent as the flag was folded and placed beside his resting place. In that moment, the war felt both distant and close. Like a shadow that would never fully fade across the galaxy, the message was clear when humanity was attacked. It did not break. It did not retreat. It united. Empires took note, their leaders whispering new strategies, no longer so quick to dismiss the young species as fragile. In backroom deals and quiet council sessions, they began to speak of humanity with a mix of caution and respect. The Zorath, now stripped of power, would serve as the living reminder of what happened when you underestimated Terrans on the Liberty's bridge. Admiral Mason stood alone for a long time, watching Earth turn slowly below. Her hands rested on the railing as the stars stretched out beyond the viewport. The war was over, but the galaxy had changed forever, and somewhere in her heart, she knew that the story of Ethan Cullen, the fury that had followed, would be told for generations because the galaxy had learned a truth it would never forget. Strike at one human, and you face them all.